Barriers prevent an incident occurring or stop one getting worse, and are classified as plant, process, or people. All barriers must be maintained and checked to ensure that they remain fit for purpose, and this is done through the maintenance, assurance, and verification procedures. Maintenance preserves the condition and function of the barrier and includes inspection activities. Assurance tests that the barriers are fit for purpose. Verification is a double check that barriers are present and working, but is only carried out on plant barriers. This is a legal requirement, and the verifier must be independent. So let's examine the three different types of barriers. All plant barriers that are safety and environmental critical elements, known as SECIs, are identified in the safety case. Each SECI has its own performance standard that defines the minimum requirements it must meet. For an emergency shutdown valve, or ESDV, this would include minimum closure times. In this incident, the emergency shutdown system, including ESDVs, was one of the SECIs that stopped the gas release getting worse. This worked effectively because the appropriate inspection, maintenance, assurance and verification routines had all taken place in line with the performance standard requirements. Maintenance on SECIs is carried out through a planned maintenance routine, also known as a PMR. For example, maintenance would be done by a technician who would inspect and grease the ESDV. Assurance on an ESDV is also undertaken by a technician who tests that the closure time meets its performance standard. The time is recorded in the installation's maintenance system. Verification is a backup to the assurance process and is undertaken by an independent company to confirm that SECIs meet the performance standards. For example, the verifier would witness the testing of a sample of ESDVs to check that they close within the time required. They would also review a sample of the maintenance records to confirm there is evidence to prove that the valve meets the performance standard. Verifiers report their findings to the duty holder. If the verifier finds that the SECI doesn't meet the performance standard, then a finding is raised. The finding is then recorded in an action tracking system and monitored to ensure the issue is addressed by the duty holder within an acceptable time frame. All process barriers must be maintained and assured to ensure that they are suitable and robust. In this incident, one of the process barriers that failed was the control of work system. It could have been maintained by ensuring that prior to reactivating the permit, a thorough toolbox talk was held on site by the new work party along with an area technician. This would have provided an opportunity for the area technician to point out the correct valve and to confirm the process isolation by showing that there was no pressure on the line before the task started. Assurance for the control of work barrier is carried out by a series of audits, including daily permit audits carried out by offshore personnel, OIM audits, and internal system audits. Audits are critical to ensure the control of work process and its implementation are robust and working. Audits are not designed to catch anyone out. People barriers focus on competence and behaviour, and they must also be maintained and assured. In this incident, the people barrier could have been maintained by undertaking a toolbox talk to ensure everyone understood the task before they started, reinforcing that everyone has the right to stop the job if they felt something was wrong. The green hat technician was not familiar with the plant, did not feel empowered to question his more experienced colleague, and therefore allowed a deviation from the plan to go ahead. Assurance of the people barrier confirms that personnel are qualified and competent to carry out the task that has been assigned to them. A person who performs a task beyond their competence will create a potential risk to their own safety and the safety of others. A competency assurance system should also identify where new and refresher training is required. In this incident, there is nothing to suggest that either of the technicians was not trained. However, there are concerns about their competence and behaviour because they deviated from the planned work scope without carrying out a risk assessment. When a barrier fails or is impaired, the impact of that failure on the installation's safety must be risk assessed. These risk assessments have different names depending on the operating company and include operational risk assessments and safety critical risk assessments. A risk assessment will help to decide whether the affected equipment can remain in use, what additional barriers could be put in place to reduce the risks, or whether operations should continue. When a process barrier is found to be impaired, a management of change review should be done to ensure major accident risks are effectively managed. When a people barrier fails, the duty holder should identify the reasons for the loss of competence. Is it to do with the job, the individual, or the organisation? The duty holder should then put arrangements in place to improve the competency. The key part of effectively managing major accident hazard risks is the identification of any degraded barriers and taking the appropriate actions to make sure that the risks are assessed and controls are put in place. This relies on you knowing the barriers and playing your part. How could a people barrier be impaired? How could a process barrier be impaired? What do you do if you find an impaired or failed barrier? How are you playing your part?